Donald Trump tried many different ways to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and I think it's justifiable to be worried that he or another Republican could make the same sorts of efforts in the future. Now, the Democrats were supposed to pass a massive bill to protect our elections, make it easier to vote, all of that. They failed to do that, unfortunately. But as a consolation prize, as what might be their last action before Congress recesses and the Republicans take over, they have passed a change to the Electoral Count Act. And I want to tell you about that. So this bill that was just approved would amend the 19th century law that governs, along with the actual Constitution, how states and Congress certify electors and declare presidential election winners, ensuring that the popular vote from each state is protected from manipulation and that Congress doesn't arbitrarily decide presidential elections when it meets to count the votes every 4 years. Senate Rules Committee Chairwoman Amy Klobuchar says we are now one step closer to protecting our democracy and preventing another January 6th. Yes, it is technically one step closer, but there's a whole lot of other steps that we could have taken that we didn't. I'm not saying it's up to her, but it's frustrating. Anyway, here are the changes that are being made. The bill clarifies, remember that for later, that the vice president has a purely ceremonial role presiding over the certification every January 6th after a presidential election, and that he or she has no power to determine the results of the election, okay? Donald Trump, are you listening? No power, it's ceremonial. Herschel Walker, like your badge, it's ceremonial, it isn't real. Anyway, Pence resisted Donald Trump's attempts to get him to overturn the results of the election, but many lawmakers were concerned that the law wasn't definitive enough. The legislation states that the vice president shall have no power to solely determine, accept, reject, or otherwise adjudicate or resolve disputes over the counting of electors in Congress. So to be clear, it already did that. They're passing an extra piece of legislation to just make sure that everyone understands that it is purely ceremony. JR, what do you think?
This is what Donald Trump was complaining about. What he was complaining about. One of the 727 things that Donald Trump was complaining about when it came to him losing the election was, now look at Congress, look at those Democrats trying to change the rules so that I can't pull this alternative slate of electors, so that I can't determine myself being the winner based off of what I can interpret as the rules. So they're definitely clarifying how this works. Can you believe they're trying to change the rules, is what he called it, change the rules so I can no longer try to subvert elections falsely. That's basically what he's been saying, and now that they're finally doing it, I'm sure he's on Truth Social talking about how, look at what they're doing, making sure I can no longer try to cheat.
Oh, he is
any longer. Of course he is.
We'll get to it.
He is, yeah.
We're gonna talk about it. That wasn't the only thing that it did, though. So it also would make it more difficult for lawmakers to object to a particular state's electoral vote. So bear in mind, they were trying to get Mike Pence to single-handedly overturn the election, but they were also in the House and the Senate trying to challenge it as well. Under current law, just one member of the Senate and one member of the House need to lodge an objection to automatically trigger votes in both chambers on whether to overturn or discard a particular state's presidential election results. This bill would significantly raise that threshold, requiring a fifth of each chamber to object before votes would be held. So that is 20 times higher in the Senate at the very least, but it still allows one party, if they want to, a vast minority of one party to do it. So it is raised, it's not foolproof necessarily. And by the way, raising the threshold for objections will do away with a partisan tradition that has rankled members on both sides. Democrats have objected the last 3 times that Republicans were elected, twice against George W. Bush, once against Trump. But in each of those cases, the Democratic candidate had already conceded, and Trump to this day falsely claims he defeated Biden. So again, I know, Sean Hannity will say that it's all the same, everybody objects. No, like a couple of random people doing it when nobody is actually trying to change the results of the election is not the same thing as a guy who inspired an insurrection that literally left people dead in the streets. I shouldn't need to explain that, but that's the case. So they've also changed that, JR.
Yeah, there's the other thing. Yeah, people challenge all the time. They talk about this whenever it comes to Democrats that have pushed back or said, hey, well, let's get a count here. Let's go clarification. Let's find out these things that I'm concerned with that potentially happened during this election. Let's get it adjudicated. After it gets all figured out, then they move on. It is 2020, damn near 2023. Has Donald Trump done that yet? I need no more of these comparisons to anyone else in the political sphere that talks about challenging elections or asking for clarifications or even legal challenges to the results. Because after it gets done, they shut the F up. Guess who hasn't done that? It's just two different things.
100%. Here's one other thing before we move on to Trump's reaction. The bill would ensure that there's only one slate of electors. That sounds good. They were trying to do their fake slates, but I still have concerns. I'll tell you why. This is a response to the unsuccessful efforts to create alternate fake slates of electors. So they say each state's governor would be required to submit the electors, which are sent under a formal process to Congress and opened at the rostrum during the joint session. That sounds good. Wait, the governor sends it. Which governor? Well, whichever the governor happens to be. The governor could be Kerry Lake. The governor could be an absolute madman. So I guess maybe this helps a little bit, so long as at the state level they don't change the results of an election. So, like stick a pin in that. Maybe we'll return to it in 2024 because they're definitely going to try to do that.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.